G'day guys and gal. The Big E is daddy. There are no cheeks he cannot clap, no planet he cannot smack, and no Xena he cannot attack. Whether it be with his flaming sword, shining in his golden armor, facing alone against the horde, with wisdom beyond the Dalai Lama. Or maybe with his psychic power, he can destroy all those before him. Any survivors will hide and cower, but their chances of escape are very grim. I've come to the serious realization that poems are gay, but I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be the #1 Warhammer channel someday. Chuck this a video a like if you want to see my rhythmical genius manifest itself as a haiku next video. If that little poem didn't expose to you the glorious power of the God Emperor of mankind, then nothing will. Who would hope to challenge him, the man who brought the galaxy to its knees, the man that caused the Chaos Gods to tremble? Maybe, just maybe, the other God Emperor of mankind who brought the realms to their knees, also who made the Chaos Gods tremble. Yeah, there's a bit of similarity here, but they're different people, I swear. Before you guys get your nerd boners in a tangle, I am pitching Sigmar from Age of Sigmar against the God Emperor here, not the Warhammer Fantasy version. The Warhammer Fantasy version is tough, but he would get one shot by the Big E taking a sneeze. The key thing here is power scaling. Sigmar has various levels up in power, starting as an overly strong human, and is now currently the greatest god of the Age of Sigmar setting. I mean, the whole thing is named after him, so you would hope so. Today we're going to go over the strengths and weaknesses of both Sigmar and the God Emperor of mankind. Both combatants will be fighting at peak fighting power, so that's Man God Sigmar with his signature Warhammer, and the Big E without paraplegia. Obviously, Games Workshop haven't just dropped each other's max bench press or dick size, so unlike our Doomslayer vs Space Marine video, animation of that coming out soon by the way, so get keen for that, we can't just compare direct numbers and go off that. More so, we'll have to use feats and power scaling, with a little bit of theory crafting to glue it all together. After that, we'll pitch the two gods in a hypothetical battle against each other to determine who would win. Let's get into it. Starting us off with the Big E. The Big E is the result of a large group of psychic shamans simultaneously killing themselves to fuse their souls together to create this perfect man. This occurred around 8000 BC. Now the Big E wasn't always this super powerful, wise, selfless man. He spent a lot of his life using his glorious, oiled, psychic power and total lack of death to plunder some serious booty. Some say this very booty plundering quest is what drove him to attempt to access the world a webway, as it is known that Eldar booty is the best booty. Getting back on topic, the God Emperor of mankind, while fast and strong, never relied on his physical power for anything. Instead, it was his extreme intelligence and psychic powers which allowed him to endure 40,000 years of shit going wrong for humanity, before he eventually stepped up and assumed the mantle of the Master of Mankind. A huge part of the Big E's strength was his ability to create strong things. Thunder Warriors, Space Marines, Custodes, Primarchs, all of these beings were created as extensions of his own will. This very same gene manipulating abilities, when combined with his psychic might, allowed the Big E to change his form. On the battlefield, he makes himself really fucking tall, noticeably taller than his Primarch sons, who all sit around 10 to 12 feet tall, and he gains the strength to match it, once again outclassing even the strongest Primarchs. The Big E can also see the future, and while this ability is not perfect as there are infinite possibilities, it's pretty handy for a one-on-one fight, as you can see every single attack his opponent will ever make before his opponent even draws their weapon. All of these powers were grown even further when the Big E took a cheeky road trip to the realms of chaos, and either stole, traded, or tricked the Chaos Gods into giving him even more power. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In the galaxy there are only a few god tier entities still around. One of these are the Catan, basically sentient star parasites. The greatest of these cheeky little sun suckers is the Void Dragon. The lore is sketchy, but it low-key sounds like the Big E had a massive anime fight with the Void Dragon, beating it into submission and then imprisoning it into the depth of Mars. This was well before he had access to his armies, technology, or god tier psychic powers. To be fair, the Void Dragon was not at full strength due to its wars against the Old Ones, but still, knocking out a star god and then dragging its ass to Mars from Earth is pretty badass. In terms of physical power, the God Emperor of mankind wields a legendary flaming sword that was imbued with the power of his very soul. It could cut through absolutely anything, including creatures' souls. That's right, his sword not only destroyed its victims' bodies, but also their very essence. A lot of the Emperor's personal technology came from the Dark Age of technology. To provide context on how advanced humans were during this Dark Age, Terminator armor, that beastly armor that only the best Space Marines wear, the armor that Abaddon, chosen Warmaster of Chaos, wears, was used for farming and mining in the Dark Age, so you better believe that the Big E's armor was Dark Age of technology advanced war gear or something, meaning it absolutely shits on everyone else's. To finish off his loadout, the Emperor has some claws, which despite looking very impractical, like it seems like having a gun would be, more effective in that hand, it does a pretty good job of ruining everyone's day, as the claws destabilize anything they cut through on a molecular level. To be honest, all of the Emperor's weapons and armor are just for pimps and gags, like he could literally walk into a battlefield naked and just mind rape anyone at will. Now, we talked a bit about his ability to clap cheeks with his mind, but considering that this is his trump card, we need to delve further in. The Emperor has no one even remotely equal to him in psychic might. The only two that come to mind are Malkador, a psycho so powerful he could hide an entire planet in a pocket dimension he created in the warp and was able to force choke Primarchs like it was nothing, and Magnus, who, for all of his supposed power, had gotten his ass kicked so many times that it made the rest of his body look pale in comparison. As an example of the Big E's power, when Captain Pedo was being all weird and religious, the Big E psychically forced him and his entire legion to kneel as he blew up their favourite city. Expanding on this, the Big E even had the ability to shoot a genuine Kamehameha, as he was demonstrated when he completely wrecked a gigantic orc warboss and his army with one blast. He used this technique again on his son Horus, which was so terrifying the Chaos Gods left Horus's body for fear it would damage them directly. The attack destroys its target in mind, body and spirit, leaving nothing remaining. So you got a man who kicked a god's ass, has god tier armaments he doesn't need, can mind rape an entire planet and elite army without breaking a sweat, can change his form at will, can influence the flow of time. Oh, and did I mention that he is a perpetual, which means he basically cannot die.
But Majorkill, if he is so good, why was Horus able to wound him so badly that he had to be put on disability benefits?
Shut your fucking mouth, Timmy, before I get the Emperor to Kamehameha the living shit out of you. When the Emperor fought Horus, Horus was juiced up on Chaos Kool-Aid, being superpowered by each of the Chaos Gods. Horus was also considered one of, if not the most powerful Primarch to begin with. On top of this again, the Big E held back in their duel, as he could not bring himself to kill his favoured son, hence allowing Horus to kick the shit out of him. As soon as the Emperor mustered the mental strength to allow himself to kill Horus, he did so instantly and easy, despite missing an arm, his throat, his eye and his spine. After this whole ordeal, the Emperor is now on his golden wheelchair, where, you guessed it, he is now more powerful than he ever was. As a trade-off to this, he had to respec all of his tank and DPS stats into intellect, so in a straight-up brawl he's not in good form, but for holding the Imperial together, he's doing a really good job. Another comparison between him and Malkador is that Malkador could only survive the Golden Throne for a couple hours before he died. The Emperor has been doing it for 10,000 years as a skeleton, so I hope that puts in perspective how absolutely fucking mind-boggling this guy's ability to shoot mind bullets is. To put it simply, the Emperor going all out would look like a character from One Punch Man on an episode where the animators were paid really well. Despite his power, foresight and knowledge, the God Emperor was still fundamentally a man. Well, at least he was before he entered the Golden Throne. When wounded by a powerful demon, he bled human blood and was visibly wrecked by the encounter. On top of this, he failed in his mission. He is currently helpless to stop the decay of his Imperium, which tends to indicate that he had a number of serious weaknesses. One of those being that he was a fucking terrible father. To compare two settings, it's important to compare the power scaling of each setting. Luckily, both of these settings have Warhammer at the start of each of their names, but it's not a direct conversion. As I discussed in my Are They Connected video, the demons and orcs in Warhammer 40k are more powerful than the demon and orcs in Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar. This is because there are significantly less souls feeding the warp in Warhammer Fantasy / Age of Sigmar. To prove my point, Chaos regularly destroys heavily fortified Imperium worlds with next to no effort in 40k, whilst it took the complete and combined power of all 4 Chaos Gods, and Manfred being a bold little dickhead, before they finally beat the world of Warhammer Fantasy, a world without bolter guns, space marines, and an endless supply of guardsmen. We got it? Good. From this we can assume, judging by Sigmar's ability to kill hundreds of orcs with nothing but a spicy warhammer, he had the power and strength of a space marine when he was just a man in fantasy. Keep in mind that the orcs are weaker in this setting, so whilst in 40k it's not uncommon for a space marine to be killed by a couple orcs or a war boss, a space marine in the fantasy setting would crunch through hundreds of them. Sigmar as a man was also able to kill a demon prince of Khorne as well as Nagash, the god of the undead. To be fair, Sigmar got him with a cheap shot, but still counts. By the time Sigmar ascended to godhood, with his strength and experience he would be about Custodes level, an absolute beast in combat, but when faced with Primarchs or the Emperor, he would still have no chance. Sigmar would go on to hang out in heaven with Ulrich, before eventually being tricked by Titsnich and thrown into the Vortex. After the collapse of the Vortex, he was freed and rejoined the fray, killing Kabanda and beating the shit out of Archaon, the Abaddon of the fantasy genre. You know who else killed Kabanda? Sanguinius. Now like I said, the Kabanda from fantasy isn't as powerful as the one from 40k, however he's still a big chungus who was able to hold off all of the fantasy's greatest heroes, including Nagash who was a genuine god at that point, until Sigmar arrived and bashed his brains in. Sanguinius struggled to put down the 40k version of Kabanda, so from this we could easily argue that Sigmar in his god fantasy form was Primarch tier. Maybe not Sanguinius levels, but I would put my money on him kicking Lorgar's pedo ass. Fantasy World ends and now we have Age of Sigmar, which again was another huge power boost for Sigmar. This is where it gets a bit hazy though. Whilst everyone got a collective buff with the arrival of Age of Sigmar, it's unclear how powerful the setting now is against 40k. In Age of Sigmar, the gods walk the battlefields. The man god Sigmar, as he was known, killed the king of Gargants, hunted the realm serpent, and even beat Gork and Morka, the combined form of Gork and Mork, in a wrestling match. When Chaos invaded the setting of Age of Sigmar, the man god banished each of the most powerful greater demons of each god. In a legendary battle, he went full anime specs and smashed through an unending chaotic horde, killing the leaders of each of the Chaos armies. A weakness can be detected here however, as when he saw Archaon, he wasn't sure if he could straight up beat him in a duel, hence he threw his warhammer at him. Big mistake though, as Daddy Titsnich opened up a portal and allowed Galmaraz to fly through it, to be lost to time and space. Losing his hammer actually meant that the battle was lost for Sigmar and his armies. He really depended on Galmaraz to be at peak performance. The fact that he also felt like Archaon was a good match for him for combat, not Khorne for example, indicates that he's not as strong as the Chaos gods. In fairness though, the God Emperor of Mankind always avoided direct combat with the Chaos gods in 40k as well, for likely similar reasons. Sigmar had the legendary powerful Azir, which is a nerdy way of saying lightning in the heavens. He's basically Thor, like look at this image, that's Thor without blonde hair and more skulls on his Mjolnir. He also had the temperament of Thor, he is not omnipresent nor can he see the future or read minds. He made mistakes and was deceived on a number of occasions by Titsnich, as well as the fact that Sigmar has given into his rage on multiple occasions. Despite all of this though, he is still a god. He does not bleed mortal blood and he does not need to shit. I'm not actually sure if the Big E needs to shit either, like it doesn't exactly get covered in the lore, but as the saying goes, if it bleeds, it also probably shits. While 40k is like sci-fi fantasy, Age of Sigmar is like high fantasy, which means using logic, reason and numbers to try and calculate Sigmar's strength is like trying to hire a priest to be an abused child's therapist. You just aren't going to get the results you're looking for. There is our comparison. Man God vs Emperor, Hammer Time vs Flaming Sword, Golden Armor and Regal Presence vs Golden Armor and a Regal Presence. You get the picture. Now we've checked out their power, abilities, fetishes and weaknesses, it's time to pitch them in a battle against each other. To set the scene, Titsnich has done some serious warp spaghetti to bait both the God Emperor and Sigmar into his realm. The two leaders of mankind face off. The Big E sees nothing but a warp entity, a god of a religion it was his duty to crush. Sigmar sees a man like him and shouts out a greeting. The Big E responds with a psychic blast, more of a probe than a lethal blow. Sigmar is driven to his knees as golden chunks of his armor fly off him. Divine golden blood leaks from his mouth as he grimaces in pain. The Big E's facial expression remains unchanged, not giving away any hint of surprise to the stranger's response to the psychic kick to the balls he had just delivered. Sigmar roars, his eyes lighting up as he rises to his feet and fires out lightning from Galmaraz. The godly power chars the Big E's armor and burns his hair, but his psychic shield remains steady. Whilst holding off this barrage, the Big E foresees endless futures to this fight, many ending in his own demise, many ending to his ultimate victory, some leading to a more interesting result. His concentration is broken by the power of Galmaraz slamming into his psychic shield after being thrown by Sigmar. Sigmar recalls it to him as he charges, leaping into the air and bringing down his Warhammer with the power to shatter worlds. The Emperor meets it with a swing of his sword and the two titans clash. The Big E's armor cracks from the impact of the crash, but his strength holds the blow. Sigmar pulls his hammer back and goes in for blow after blow, each one more fierce than the last, as the Big E is pushed on the defensive. Sigmar roars as he pours his fury into his next strike. The Big E once again meets it, but the full force of a god is too much for his defenses, as his sword is knocked from his grasp. In response, the Big E drives his talons straight into Sigmar's sternum, golden blood flowing from the wound, as Sigmar responds with a right hook to the Big E's jaw, breaking it and staggering the master of mankind. His claw slides from Sigmar as Sigmar follows up his punch with an upward swing of his hammer, smashing straight into the Big E's chest, launching him dozens of meters away, breaking his armor and shattering his ribs. Sigmar holds his free hand over the puncture wounds on his stomach, his godly powers healing the cuts. At the same time, the Big E rises back to his feet, his perpetual abilities rebuilding his dead lungs and broken bones. He summons his sword back to his hand as he notices the potential futures ahead of him narrow by the actions he has already taken. The ending of this battle he craved was still one of the millions of potential outcomes. Sigmar prepared to charge again, but the God Emperor, not wishing to engage in another disadvantageous melee, sent out a psychic attack towards Sigmar's mind. Instantly, the man god howls in pain, dropping Galmaraz and clutching his head with his hands. The Big E drives his will against Sigmar's, hoping to dominate him, and in doing so, sees into Sigmar's memories. He sees a boy born to a noble chieftain. He sees that boy become a man as he fights off the greenskins to save his lands. He sees that man become a legend as he casts down Nagash and fights off the hordes of chaos. And finally, he sees that legend become a god as he fights to save his doomed world from chaos. The Big E feels something foreign in him, doubt. Doubt that his actions to guide and save mankind were the right ones. If so noble a man like his adversary could keep chaos at bay without the schemes, the lies and the betrayals, then why couldn't he? His doubt is met with the rage of a god who has been fighting for his reality since the day he was born. Sigmar drives his will against the Big E and banishes him from his mind completely. Sigmar rises to his feet and once again throws his hammer at the Big E with renewed anger, the only anger that a man can feel when his mind is violated. The Big E, psychically drained after his attempt at Sigmar's mind, can only raise his clawed hand to stop the blow. The hammer slams into his talons, breaking them and shattering the bones in his arm. Sigmar fires lightning from his outstretched arm, slamming into the Big E and knocking him to the ground. The Big E is only just able to get his sword up in time to block a killing blow from Sigmar. The shockwave once again buckles the Big E as he uses his psychic might to aid his rapidly failing body against the onslaught of hammer blows. As his strength begins to fail him, the Big E yells, "Enough!" The force of his words break through Sigmar's blind rage, enough for him to respond with, "Only oblivion awaits you, demon of Titsnitch." The Big E is quick to reply with, "I am no demon. Our common enemy is the ruinous powers. Together we can crush them." Sigmar laughs and lifts his hammer. Before he brings it down, however, he says, "I am no fool, changeling. This ends now." But before he can swing his killing blow, a blinding light envelops the warp, the power to destroy solar systems, the power that can kill a soul, the power that killed Horus and made chaos recoil in fear, is manifested in the form of the Big E's Kamehameha. His blast slams into Sigmar and pushes him back, Sigmar's own monstrous soul burning brightly in defiance as it fights to avoid destruction. Sigmar tries to push through it, but this power is something beyond even he has ever witnessed, as he feels his very essence begin to burn away. Before the darkness consumes him, the light stops. Sigmar is on his knees, his golden armor charred to black, his normally golden eyes now bloodshot. Above him stands the master of mankind, shining in his golden brilliance, his flaming sword in his hands. Titsnitch, previously witnessing the fight from a hidden distance, leans in eagerly to witness one of his greatest enemies destroy the other, his ultimate scheme finally coming together. He had hoped Sigmar would destroy the Anamthra, as the countless souls within the Milky Way galaxy would be much tastier than the significantly less and more volatile souls within the realms of Sigmar, but a win was a win. The Big E would look at his beaten foe, Sigmar, looking up in defiance, but without the strength to even lift his warhammer, there was nothing he could do. The Big E had won. The Big E whispers for mankind, as he charges up another blast of blinding light, which strikes the shattered form of Sigmar. However, this time it is different. Sigmar's soul does not extinguish, no, it is relit. His strength returns to him and his golden armor is re-snown together as he once again glows brightly. This was not an execution, but a healing light. With the healing light comes a psychic message that burns into Sigmar's mind. Death to the architect of fate. With Titsnich so confident of victory, he had let his guard down. It wanted to witness the destruction of its enemies in person. As he was cackling from what he thought was the death of Sigmar, he suddenly recoiled in horror as he felt the overwhelming psychic presence of the God Emperor of mankind seize him, blocking his escape into the warp. He lashed out, his immense psychic sorceries ripping across his realm, and the realms beyond in a panicked state. The warp spun up with such fury that not even its own denizens were safe from its volatility. Despite this, Titsnich was trapped, as the Big E gritted his teeth and held him steady. Sigmar rose to his feet and turned to the thrashing manifestation of Titsnich, a colossal creature in what would be the warp's version of a sky. Sigmar charges himself up, crackling with electricity and heavenly fire as he flies towards his true enemy. He reaches the tentacled mass of a god and with a strike, using his very soul as fuel, Galmaras slams on the Changer of Ways, the power of Sigmar and the Big E mingling to create a force so powerful, Titsnich is utterly obliterated. His realm begins to crumble as the universe sighs in relief, one of its many cancers now cured. Without words, the Big E holds out a hand to Sigmar, who grasps it. The two leaders of mankind nod to each other as the Big E teleports Sigmar back to his realms and himself back to the Imperium. The battle of the gods had ended. So yeah, I would say that the Big E comes out as the stronger being overall, but in saying that, it's not an easy fight by far. In terms of raw power, both combatants are similar, with Sigmar probably even coming out on top. He is a god after all, whilst the Big E is just a man. A very powerful man, but a man all the same. The big difference comes from the Big E's intelligence, foresight, and psychic powers. Sigmar has none of these. It's kinda like a fight between Thor and Loki, except Loki is a similar power level to Thor. In terms of melee, Sigmar wins here hands down. His whole shebang was bashing his way through his enemies, whilst any time the Big E displayed true power, it was never with his sword. His claws, whilst awesome with their science and ability to break down molecules, aren't super effective against a god who lives in a setting where molecules aren't really a thing. However, Sigmar had a history of struggling to deal with enemies who are masters of magic and psychic powers, having to rely on cheap shots to beat them or just straight up losing to them. The Big E was also not stupid enough to kill such a formidable foe of chaos, and so once he realised that Sigmar was not just a warp entity, he was able to turn the tables on Titsnich, although that ending was more for fun and not really for lore reasons. Same with the start of the fight, as Titsnich is a different entity between 40k and Age of Sigmar, so the setup wasn't exactly lore friendly. In saying that though, if anything is going to kill a Chaos God, it's going to be a team up between Daddy E and Sigmar. And that does us for today guys. If you enjoyed this video, I make a bunch more like it, so if you want to consider clicking the subscribe button and then clicking the real subscribe button, it'd be awesome. If you want to support the channel and get access to a boatload of Warhammer hentai, then Patreon is the place to be. Only $1 gives you access to everything. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.